Calling all pundits and mavens. Put down that remote because the Mike Pence Show is on the air. Indy TV presents 30 minutes of programming cram-packed with interesting guests, cool topics, and a host who looks oh so snazzy in a blue suit. Now, here he is, Mike Pence.
Welcome to the Mike Pence Show. In 1996, not only will Evan Bayh face his last session of the General Assembly, but because of Indiana's term limits, he'll leave office and return to private life. Now, during his 7 years in the governor's mansion, Bayh has been, without question, one of the most popular elected officials in the history of Indiana. According to surveys taken just prior to 1994's election, Evan Bayh enjoyed nearly a 69% approval rating among registered voters. During the same period, President Bill Clinton's approval rating was only 37%. So what's ahead for Evan Bayh? Tax cuts, twins, the U.S. Senate, the White House? Well, last month we got a hint when the Indianapolis Star reported that Bayh had formed a committee to explore a run for the Senate. So in fact, we went to the streets of Indianapolis to ask what you thought about that option.
I think that Evan Bayh is a fine politician. Even though he is a Democrat, he's not as liberal as many that we've seen, and I think that bodes well for him.
I think Evan Bayh is going to challenge Coates for the United States Senate, and I think he'll probably win.
I'm not sure. I don't know in the next couple of years what opportunities might be available for Evan Bayh. If he's looking at the Senate, his next shot would be against Dan Coates in '98. And while he may have a good shot of beating Coates, I think that's 2 years down the road, and people might tend to forget about him.
Even though he's a Democrat coming from the state of Indiana, I think he's very popular, which says a lot about him. So I think he would be a good candidate.
I think he definitely would have a good chance at that, and I think he would find supporters everywhere, yes.
I've always liked Evan Bayh. I thought he did a real good job as governor. I wish he could stay governor. I do.
So what's ahead for Evan Bayh? Short answer from my standpoint is just about whatever he wants. I mean, come on. I mean, last year he had nearly 2 times the approval rating of the president. Despite the fact that I differ with him on a number of social issues, it's hard to view his no tax hike record as anything but conservative. And different from the man in the White House, Evan Bayh really is a new Democrat. And if that's the future of the Democratic Party, then Evan Bayh is going to be a part of that future. But what's ahead for Evan Bayh? That's the question tonight, and we'll ask it of him. Governor Evan Bayh joins us in studio to discuss his plans for the state's surplus, tax cuts, and his political future. And who better to debate this Democrat governor's future than 2 of the state's leading Democratic pundits, Harrison, Ullmann, and Delaney, together at last in the bullpen. Later, Reid Duffy will give us his thoughts on our youthful governor. But, before we go into all of this speculation, here's the top 5 things that we know are in Evan Bayh's future. Number 5, the joyful sound of baby in the house times 2. Number 4, diapers times 2. Number 3, midnight feedings times 2. Number 2, teaching security guards how to change diapers. And the number 1 thing we know is in Evan Bayh's future, learning how to run the state on just 3 hours of sleep. What's ahead for Evan Bayh? Keep it right there. We'll ask him and be right back.
That economic growth is good for Indiana. It's good because we will grow this community and not allow other states like Florida or anyone else to come and steal our companies or steal our jobs. We have what it takes to get the job done here in Indiana.
And work with the company to see to it that companies stay here and expand here and keep jobs here for both us and for our kids. And that's what we've decided to do here in Indiana with this facility. So I think it's a good decision for all of us.
Welcome back to the Mike Pence Show. What's ahead for Evan Bayh? Well, why have a bunch of pundits in and ask them? We're fortunate to be joined in the studio by the man himself, Indiana Governor Evan Bayh. Welcome to the Mike Pence Show.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you being here very much. Now, this is a hard-hitting show. This is serious news. So I'm going to ask you the question all Indiana wants answered right out of the box. How is Susan?
Well, she's doing great, Mike. Thank you. We're both a little.
I mean, you're down to the wire here.
Well, it's only about 2 more weeks, so it won't be long. But the children.
Expecting Two of them.
Twins, that's right.
Twins.
And the doctor tells us that everything's looking good. She's physically a little uncomfortable, but so happy that doesn't matter much.
That's really hard to imagine that she'd be uncomfortable at that point. My wife will kill me for that line.
Each of the kids are already 6 pounds, so we'll be somewhere close to 7 times 2 when we're done. So that's
unbelievable. Well, she has our best wishes. I want to
thank you.
We got you for a couple of segments here. In this first segment, I'd really like to talk to you about a couple of policy issues. I mean, we're talking about whining and wailing and crying in the middle of the night. You're going to be hearing a lot of that, and that's just because the legislature's coming back to town. I mean, with the legislature coming back, we learned this summer that you had a $1.3 billion state surplus right out of the box. Have you decided yet what your administration plans to do with that much extra money in the state coffers?
Well, it's entirely possible, Mike, that there may be some kind of tax reduction, assuming the economy continues to grow. And in fact, our surplus may be somewhat larger than the $1.3 billion that was announced this summer.
Is that right?
Even though revenues have continued to come in above expectations, we've continued to keep costs under control, keep spending down, particularly in the Medicaid area. So as a matter of fact, think about this. Our budget isn't balanced today. We have a structural surplus rather than a deficit. So every month the surplus gets larger.
We don't mind those out of
No, that's right. I mean, people are so unaccustomed to hearing that. I get shakes of the head just like yours, but it is true. We have a growing surplus, and so when you have a structural imbalance on the plus side, it makes some sense to try and give some targeted tax relief in ways that will help to make education more affordable, help to create jobs, things like that.
Now,
two caveats, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've told me there were two major issues that you had to get by. One is the federal budget, and the other has to do with revenue forecasting.
Right. And both of those are still outstanding. The first week in December, we'll get the revenue forecast, which you know is essentially a prediction of how the economy will perform over the next 6 months to a year. And secondly, it looks now like it'll be closer to Christmas before we know what the federal budget will include. And the legislative leadership and I have concluded that we really need to try and get as firm a grip on both of those things as we can before coming out with anything concrete.
Excuse me for interrupting, the particular impact on Indiana's budget would be the Medicaid disbursements. I mean, we're talking block grants with welfare. Is that going to impact Indiana negatively?
Welfare isn't the big ticket item. It will impact some. There are some others, for example, education reductions, anti-drug, some cuts, the drug-free schools program, for example, heating assistance for the elderly, some of those things, which do total several tens of millions of dollars. But by far and away the largest item is the Medicaid health care expense. And if a lot of that is simply being shifted back to the states, obviously that'll have a big budget impact. We need to understand what that's going to mean for Indiana before we can do anything of any magnitude.
Now, President Bill Clinton, a personal friend of yours, close political friend, he's indicated that right now he's going to veto the Republican budget plan. Do you think there's going to be compromise? Is there a version of the Republican budget that you would encourage President Clinton to sign?
I think it's in everyone's interest to have an agreement that will be good for the country. I know the president feels very strongly that way. I assume the congressional leaders do as well. Right now they're staking out their respective positions, and I'm assuming, Mike, that there will be a compromise along the following lines. What the president cares most about is protecting education and protecting senior citizens. And if there is some movement on those two issues, I think he would in all likelihood be willing to agree to most of the timetable set out by the Republicans.
And that would be reducing the cuts and increases in Medicare in particular when you're talking about senior citizens?
That's right. The president wants a balanced budget. I think that's important. And you may get into a little bit later about New Democrats versus other Democrats. I personally feel that balanced budgets are important. I think that it's important in the long run to protecting the less fortunate and those who need government assistance. I think the president believes that too, but he wants to balance the budget without cutting education and without harming seniors. And if they can reach a compromise on those two things, I think they'll have an agreement.
And if they reach that compromise, we got to run out to a break, but in Indiana, possibility of the Bayh administration offering a tax cut proposal?
It's a real possibility.
Real possibility. Well, listen, we got to grab our first commercial break. When we come back, we'll shuffle off all this public policy boring stuff and get into the politics of this thing. You're going to be going out of office. A lot of people are wondering what's next on the horizon. Keep it right there, guys. Indiana Governor Evan Bayh on the Mike Pence Show. We'll be right back.
I think the time has come to reach deep down inside each and every one of us and to give the very best that we have to offer to our state and to our nation, so that we can create for ourselves and for those who will follow in our footsteps an Indiana future of which we can all be proud. And it is the honor of my lifetime to help lead the way. Thank you all very much.
Welcome back to the Mike Pence Show. We're fortunate to be joined tonight in this special edition by Indiana Governor Evan Bayh. Welcome back aboard.
Thank you, Mike.
And we talked about all that governor stuff. I know that's your 9 to 5, but I want to talk politics now. Let's get into this whole deal. I mean, look, 1994, let's admit it, was not a good year for your party, for the Democratic Party nationally. It was kind of a low water mark, if you will. But at the same time, as I said in my monologue, you had a 69% approval rating among registered voters in Indiana. How was your message different from the image or the message of the National Democratic Party in 1994?
Well, one obvious difference is that we've held the line on taxes here in Indiana, Mike. We're only one of 2 states in the entire country that has not raised taxes during these 7 years. And in fact, this will be the first 8-year period in 50 years in Indiana that there's been no state tax increase of any kind. So we have a balanced budget without raising taxes. I think most Hoosiers, working men and women, feel that that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
We've also emphasized economic growth,
Okay.
and I think many Democrats in Washington do too. My own feeling is that it's a lot easier to help the less fortunate when you have a growing economy creating better jobs than it is when you have a stagnant pie. And rightly or wrongly, and in some cases I think wrongly, some of the Democrats in Washington have been stereotyped as only caring about more regulation, more barriers to creating economic growth and job creation. And we've tried to take the opposite approach to that here in Indiana.
Well, I mean, you're talking growth, you're talking about opposing tax increases. Should the National Party start singing off your song sheet in the future?
Well, I think you'll see many of these themes repeated. For example, the whole welfare debate area. Many Democrats in Washington, including the president, feel that we have to have personal responsibility as well as opportunity. And that means people working when they have the skills and jobs become available, and behaving in their own lives in a responsible way rather than just taking public benefits for granted. So I think that's a theme that we've tried here that will...
And the image of the National Democratic Party has been more akin to the entitlement, the welfare state, whether that's the intention of every individual Democratic leader or not. Is that part of the image that pulled down the party in '94, and you're saying bring personal responsibility, fiscal responsibility back to the party's message?
Oh, well, I think that's an important component. I think if people don't trust Democrats to handle their money and to handle budgets wisely, they probably won't trust us with much else. Although I could say last year was unequivocally a bad year for the Democrats electorally, no doubt about that, Mike. But I would say one thing. I think we may be living in a period of time where there's so much underlying anxiety that whoever is in office at that particular time may be subject to sort of a throw the rascals out kind of mood because of the underlying insecurity, particularly with regard to the economy.
Yeah. Well, let me get to your personal politics before we run out of time here. You're leaving office next year, not by your own volition, term limits in Indiana. You've organized a committee to start raising funds for a race for the U.S. Senate. Have you decided, are you running for the Senate in 1998?
Well, it's a real possibility. As you mentioned at the outset, we do have a more important event coming up here in a couple of weeks, our children. I want to be...
You're about to realize how much more important.
Well, that's right. And I want to be a good father more than anything, Mike, and I want to assure myself that I can be a good parent and a good husband, consistent with still running for office before I make any decisions. So,
but after that possibility?
I'm putting the practical elements in place for such a run. Okay. But we'll probably make up my mind sometime early in 1997.
Who do you like, down to a minute or so here, who do you like in the Senate right now? If you were in the Senate right now, who would you most align yourself with among the Democratic Party?
I have a lot of respect for Joe Lieberman, a senator from Connecticut, happens to be the head of the Democratic Leadership Council right now. John Breaux is a person I think I have a lot of respect for, and there are several others. Perhaps on both sides of the aisle, but I want to be my own person and not just a carbon copy of anyone else.
Okay. Well, tonight's the greatest evidence why we need this to be an hour show, but you're great to be here. I appreciate it so very much. And just for coming by, Joe, you can take it to commercial because I'm just going to, this is a dad-to-dad thing. Coming by.
Oh, my.
I need to kind of show you. You open these up and kind of bring them through. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we'll be joined in the bullpen and Delaney, Harrison, Ullmann, and Reid Duffy. Be right back, guys.
This is what I got to look forward to.
Welcome back to the Mike Pence Show. This, of course, is part of the show we call the bullpen, and I know we usually have a Republican and a Democrat here, but since it is going to be members of the Democratic Party who decide in the first part what's ahead for Evan Bayh, we are welcoming to the studio former state Democratic Chairwoman Ann Delaney and another prominent Democratic pundit and friend of the show, Harrison Ullmann. Harrison Ullmann, let's get to it. How do you rate and assess the 7-year career of Governor Evan Bayh?
It's a career that's going to leave no footsteps, no footprints in the history of Indiana. At the end of 8 years, he's going to come out of it with a record of no new taxes, no tax increases, and not much else.
No new taxes, but see, that's the conservative in me says I'm not.
Well, there's been a price
do
for
without
that.
some footprints. Then.
Indiana has some very serious problems that it has to face in the future. We have a very uneducated workforce named just one of those problems. That we have one of the least educated workforces of any state in the United States of America. And very little progress has been made in that 8 years, and eventually that is going to hurt us and hurt us a lot. Just to use that one example.
Ann Delaney, the other side of the Democratic Party, no footprint for Governor Evan Bayh?
Harrison, come on. I mean, it's not only an issue of tax increases, it's not only an issue of tremendous economic growth. I mean, an unemployment rate consistently a percentage point or higher below the national average. But he has taken steps in education, not just in accountability in education by testing, but the 21st Century Scholars Program, where I think the last count was almost 12,000 high school students who would not otherwise be eligible for college will be available for tuition subsidies to have that educated workforce you're talking about.
Isn't it true to say, as Harrison points out, from the standpoint of his more traditional activist liberal agenda, there hasn't been a lot of activist liberal big government stuff by Evan? I'm not complaining.
He's right. I feel lonely
been,
here.
Right?
No, there certainly hasn't been, and that is he is obviously a new Democrat in that regard, and fiscal responsibility is at the top of his list. But so is accountability, and so is an educated and productive workforce. Jobs that pay a living wage.
Yeah, a real live new Democrat. Harrison Ullmann, how do you argue with the new Democrats being the wave of the Democratic Party in the future if this guy had a 69% approval rating when the go-washer of 94?
So did Steve Goldsmith.
When?
So did George Bush.
When?
Before the bottom fell out.
Yeah, after Desert Storm, and
right.
only for that short window of about 2 weeks. These two guys,
these are the two most prominent politicians in Indiana, different parties, their approval ratings are way up. One of the reasons for that is neither one of them has had a serious, articulate opponent for the last 8 years. When Evan ran the last time against a guy named Lindley Pearson, it was so bad that every time I typed Lindley Pearson on my word processor, the spell checker said, lonely person.
Yeah, very funny. But the fact of the matter is that Lindley Pearson didn't do well in the election. There's no question about that. Right. But that's to Evan Bayh's credit, not to Lindley Pearson's criticism. He had a well-funded
beyond the
campaign.
agenda, beyond the record, I got to get out of both of you here. I mean, this is an argument, an inter-family argument.
Yes.
I appreciate you allowing me in the living room on this.
I'm an adopted child in this family.
Is Evan Bayh going to run for the United States Senate, and will he carry this new Democrat message into that kind of a campaign?
Whatever he runs for, and I certainly think the U.S. Senate is a distinct possibility, he will carry that message, and that is the message of the Democratic Party in Indiana. I mean, I know Harrison is much more comfortable with a tax and spend kind of an approach, but the rest of us are not, and so it's a different dynamic. I don't expect him to change his philosophy no matter what he runs for.
How about that? You have long been a fan of the old senator, not the old mean respectful, but the former Senator Birch Bayh. Would you be happy to see a Senator Evan Bayh with these kind of criticisms?
Well, compared to another term for Senator Dan Coates, yes, of course I would. But I will say that the new Democratic philosophy is pretty much what the old Republican philosophy used to be before the new Republicans came in and took the party about 20 miles to the right. That Evan Bayh now is running pretty much where moderately conservative Republicans were running 5-10 years ago. That's one of the reasons why so many Democrats lost in the last election. When Republicans run against Republicans,
you saw the defeat in '94 as a result of running away from the traditional liberal base of the Democratic Party?
Running away from that and not running toward anything else, except saying that if you want cheaper welfare programs, we can give you cheaper welfare programs. We won't be as enthusiastic about it, If you want us to save money, we can save money.
I need a real short answer here because we got 30 seconds. I never asked him, but is this guy going to run for president of the United States someday?
I don't think that that's something you can plan for. I really don't. I mean, we're talking about something so far down the road. Could it happen? Would he be the type of person Democrats would like to see? Yes. Will it happen? Who knows?
Type of person, will it happen, President of the United States, Evan Bayh?
I agree completely with Ann.
Thank you.
Yes, on this one thing, that there's no way to look at the future and see a presidency for Evan Bayh.
Okay. They found
Or
I don't know
anyone
if they
else.
meant to agree, but they did find agreement. It's time for the incorrigible Duffy's Digest with Reid Duffy. Take it away, Reid.
I don't know about you, but I can't believe the Evan Bayh administration wraps it up after next year. Indeed, after nearly 8 years in office, Evan Bayh is one of the nation's senior governors, and he isn't even 40 yet. When first elected in 1988, compared to his predecessors, he looked like he was assuming the governor's office as part of a junior achievement project. That's why it seemed odd that the Indiana Republicans, who controlled the governorship for nearly 25 years, became totally unglued when he ran. Thanks to his father, Senator Birch Bayh, he had a quality only one or two Indiana Democrats possessed in this century, name recognition. And this so stunned Republicans, they went to uncharacteristically absurd lengths to keep that recognizable name off the ballot, trying to convince the courts and the giggling electorate that Evan Bayh wasn't a resident of Indiana and perhaps an illegal alien. With Hoosier voters thus responding with, "Give me a break," Evan Bayh won in a romp, breezed to a second term in '92, and now looks to spend his 40s in the U.S. Senate, with him and his wife Susan ready to torment a new generation of Republicans with 2 new Bayhs in the very near future. Governor Bayh's tenure has been relatively quiet, cautious, and prudent, privately annoying professional Democrats for injecting frugality to state finances in defiance of the Democratic philosophy that if you're going to collect taxes, you have a moral obligation to the taxpayer to spend it. Meanwhile, the GOP wants the governor arrested for impersonating a Republican who believed the purpose of collecting taxes is so you can cut them at a later date. And soon Governor Bayh will be leaving office with a porky budget surplus and in a position to lavish us with tax cuts as a gubernatorial going-away present. So in the short term, the Evan Bayh years will go down as judiciously sedate. However, years from now, historians may look upon this stretch as the period when Indiana let its hair down, first with the lottery, then investing our hard-earned bucks on a filly named Glue Factory in the 5th race at Hoosier Park in Anderson, before heading back to the betting parlors of Indy to put our milk money on groin pull in the 7th race at Hialeah, and since the evening's still young, eventually heading to Gary to play the slots with Donald Trump, or down to the Ohio River for a few hands of canasta on the riverboat Evan Bell. I don't think the governor ever had this in mind, but under his watch, people no longer refer to Indiana as the in-bed-by-9:30 state. But I guess that's what happens when elected officials start treating their citizens like adults, and that may be Evan Bayh's legacy as governor of Indiana.
Thanks, Reid. So what's ahead for Evan Bayh? Well, I hope we've shed a little light on the subject. In the final analysis, though, that question will have to be answered by our guest himself. But suffice it to say that despite our differences on certain social issues, I believe Indiana has been well served, and the Democratic Party would be wise to take note of Evan Bayh. Thanks to Ann Delaney and Harrison Ullmann for letting us in on the Democratic Party debate. Oh, and to First Lady Susan Bayh, you're in our prayers. This is Mike Pence.
Part of the studio audience for the Mike Pence Show, call 241-23TV for your free tickets.